How many countries in the history of the EU have left? One. Now, think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that. Why would countries want to come into the EU and only one would want to go out? Well, and we left the Europe to be sovereign. I'm going, when were you not sovereign, jokers?
Yeah.
You were sovereign while you were in the EU. And now what you've done is, under your supposed new sovereignty, you basically hobbled yourself. And that's the type of, I don't know how much that loud, fact-free Brexiteer voice is still there. Then you get this snake oil salesman in 2016 who's not talking about the issues. He's not talking about this. He's just coming in there and playing that politics of division, and that politics of hatred, and that politics of spectacle. So I'm not sure we would have recovered by now. And I'm waiting for that moment of recovery, and it has to get really, I hate to say this, it has to get dark before you get recovery. The American system bent during Trump's first term to try to rip it up. But now it's not a question of bending, it's a question of whether it breaks. It's a question of breaks, because they tried to break the government in the first few months, and they have damaged it pretty badly. They now are trying to break the electoral process. And I don't mean by not having elections entirely. I mean by just, it is legal manipulation.
My guest is Professor Scott Lucas, a highly experienced and globally renowned expert in American politics, US and British foreign policy, and a wide range of international affairs, with specific focus on the Middle East, Iran, Europe, and Asia. He also has expertise in the new media, intelligence services, and propaganda. Scott is a frequent and leading political analyst on major international media outlets, including Times Radio, BBC, CNN, Sky News, Al Jazeera English, France 24, and many others. He has also been an active journalist since 1979 and is the founder and editor-in-chief of EA Worldview, a prominent news site that provides daily news and analysis of global affairs.
Do me a big favor and make sure that you've subscribed on YouTube to help us reach as many people as possible, keep them informed, and help them get out of the clickbait shadows and unmask the narratives. Thank you so much, and back to the episode. Scott, welcome back again. Our fortnightly geopolitical rant, retort, or whatever you want to call it these days. How are you doing?
There's nothing happening. I'm bored. So, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Have you noticed anything?
Well, the biggest news, like as a basketball fan and ex-basketball, is the New York Knicks winning the championship. Yeah. I don't support the Knicks, but it's still impressive. So that's it. That's the end of the episode. Bye, everyone.
Well, yeah, I'm a Celtics fan, so I'm a Boston fan, so I shouldn't, but it was the first championship since the 1970s when I was a boy, and I can remember Willis Reed and Walt Frazier, and
wow.
Those great teams. But then what sold it for me is Zohran Mamdani's speech. The guy who supposedly is a communist now, according to all the troubles. And I don't know if you saw that. It's like an 8.5 minute speech for the Knicks celebration after they've had the big parade. And it's just amazing. I mean, it's one of the best political speeches I've ever seen in my life, because it is a sporting speech. Mamdani is going all through how the Knicks rallied against adversity and how, they had one of the miracle comebacks, and I think game 4 it was, of the finals against San Antonio. And then they wrap it up in game 5. But he's name checking each of the players, right? And they all come from different backgrounds. They've got different stories, and he's just reeling it off just like that. And he's weaving it in with the idea of these guys kept coming back, just like New Yorkers come back. New Yorkers don't know when they're supposedly done, which is true. I've met a few, right? He says, but it's all part of this thing of that New York is on the up again.
The Knicks did not just win for New York City. They won like New York City. What is New York if not your back up against the wall? A dream that feels just out of reach, a rent payment you don't know how you'll ever make. What is New York if not 99.6% of the world stacked against you? And who are New Yorkers if not people who hear those odds and smile? who look at a 0.4% chance of success and ask, why are you giving me a head start? This is our city. This is our team. For 53 years we watched. For 53 years we waited. Now we've won.
And I have to say that Mamdani's done a few interviews after that Knicks appearance, including one with, I think, ABC News this weekend, which was just masterful, right? Absolutely masterful.
Yeah.
And I think it was Jonathan Karl, the host, says, your critics say they're going to make you the face of the Democratic Party. And Mamdani goes, okay, let them. Look at what we've done in New York in terms of delivering already in less than a year on promises regarding housing, on promises on affordability of food items, and promises in terms of transport, on promises in terms of, keeping good businesses with relations with business, even though you realize you might have to increase taxes to fund some of this. And I got to say, this crosses party, Republican, Democrat, is certainly beyond communist. The sentiment out of New York is buoyed by the Knicks victory, in part. It's the best good feeling story you've got out of New York for years. And so, okay, grudgingly, as a Celtics fan, well done, Knicks. Less grudgingly, well done, Mamdani.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I did see that speech, and it was fantastic. And I think, again, going back to the point that you and I talked about in our first ever episode together, that the message he pushed out, it wasn't a socialist message, nor it was a democratic message or any kind. It was the message that everybody supported. Like it seems from the comments that I've seen. And interestingly, although we're not going to talk probably about him today, is of course the upcoming Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Andy Burnham, right? Who's been parachuted down. He did a speech yesterday, the time of the recording of this episode, where he was kind of Mamdani-esque. Maybe not as I don't want to say extreme, because it's not extreme. I agree with everything, but it's more, but he definitely, I think he kicked a few balls, to an extent. I listened to the comments some people made on LBC radio, and quite a lot of conservative voters called in, and they said that they absolutely loved the speech as well. I'm like,
that's interesting.
So is that something going on now? I mean, again, is that the Hungary effect or what? It's like, I think people are starting to wake up to this fact that really, we need to start cleaning up the shit now, right? Enough of this political mumbo jumbo nonsense, because it's irrelevant.
I think it is, because the takeaway line I got from Burnham was basically, we got to fix Westminster, right? Now, it's a common theme for someone to come in as a supposed outsider, right, into a system that they're going to lead. I've seen it in the US, seen it in the UK, seen it in Europe. Now, Andy Burnham, of course, was a consummate insider, in the early part of his career. As an
Tony
MP,
Blair, no less.
with he's a Blairite, right? And he makes the challenge. He challenges a couple times for the Labour leadership, losing out to Miliband and then losing out to Jeremy Corbyn, and then that's when he makes the move up to Manchester. Now, in a way, Manchester then positions him as, okay, I'm not on the inside in London. I'm going to achieve something different here, and I think by and large, Manchester's been a pretty good story in relation to the rest of the country in the post-Brexit, dumpster fire that the UK has found itself in. So when Burnham comes in, he is from outside Westminster, albeit only over the past few years, but he can come and say, like, we're going to do things differently here, right? Now, that is a message where if you can make it stick, goes beyond Labour and Conservative, and indeed political party, because if you look at it where we are, since 2016, Theresa May is undone because of the sniping within the Conservative Party at her, especially from the Brexiteers, right? Boris Johnson does the golden age stick on, the UK under Brexit, which doesn't happen. And then, of course, Boris is seen as being out for himself, to be honest with you. Like, the laws don't apply to me. Ethics doesn't apply to me. Financial restrictions don't apply to me, you name it. then of course the cabbage comes in, and so Liz's 49-day reign of terror, and then that collapses as a complete ineptitude. Sunak, the Conservatives are kind of doomed at this point. So Sunak struggles on, but it's like, that's not really working. And then of course, Starmer, Labour's got the biggest majority in modern British history. And you think, well, he's got the space to really try to do things differently, to try to get in and to get to grip with a different economic path, trying to deal with some of the social issues. And what you find is that, Starmer is very much a pragmatist. I know that, but he comes across as being reactive, right? He's just reactive and some of his reactions then screw up, like his move on pensions, his move on the immediate one about cutting, the heating allowance, right? Cold weather allowance. And then he has to react to that. And he's just never on the front foot. What Burnham's saying is, I'm going to go on the front foot. I'm not going to play by the rules that previous governments have done. And let's see if we can get to the course. He's got to deliver now. See, that's the thing. Yeah. And the problem here is that I talked about it, I think, with a couple of other outlets recently. It's like the time is compressed now. Because of the social media environment, the time's compressed. We used to say first 100 days in the U.S. to mark out what a president was doing. And now it's like, what do you want to bring that down to? First month, first week? And you gotta do something to show the punters that you're serious about this. Yeah. So I hope he succeeds. And I'm saying that beyond party. I hope he succeeds because I still am deeply attached to the UK and I just want to see it be a better country. And I got to say that just riffing off of this week, I did, on Scott Lucas Worldview, I did a couple of stings on Instagram recently and then on YouTube Shorts. And these are 2-minute pieces. One was when Starmer resigned, and then the other one was talking to a Polish outlet about the 10th anniversary of Brexit. And I'm like, look, guys, Brexit was an emotive. It was an emotive decision. It wasn't born out of sensible economic, social, political calculation. It was a little England decision. And I say that knowing what the results were on the referendum from Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, right? It was very much this little England, this idea that we don't need Europe. We can be great like we used to. And it kicked you in the teeth. I'm sorry. You all get kicked in the teeth. And the reason why I'm telling this story is not to big up my analysis. It is what it is. It's just the reaction you get. And the reaction is, and these are going to be some of my most watched videos because everybody coming in and say, you America, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, well, I'm a UK citizen. You America, what the hell are you talking about? You don't know. The UK is doing great. We're doing greater than Germany and France and the European Union. We're just doing great. I'm going, yeah, okay, well, there's fantasy and there's reality, boys and girls. And then it's like, and it's like, oh, yeah, and we left the Europe to be sovereign. I'm going, when were you not sovereign, jokers? Yeah. You were sovereign while you were in the EU. And now what you've done is, under your supposed new sovereignty, you basically hobbled yourself. And that's the type of, I don't know how much that loud, fact-free Brexiteer voice is still there. We could have a real discussion on where the Reform Party is now. My good friend Hassan Patel just published a great piece for me on EA Worldview about it. He thinks they've peaked. I'm hoping he's right. I'm not sure how much of this blinkered Brexit view is representative of the country, but Burnham's still going to have to deal with it. He's still going to have to deal with folks, because what happened with Brexit is this is why they're really stung. Having bought into the idea that little England is going to rule the world in some sense, what happens is when they get kicked in the teeth by the economic reality, they doubled down on this. And the guys who got them into this mess doubled down on it. And that includes 5 million quid Nigel Farage. So 5 million quid Farage comes out and saying, oh, it's because we didn't do Brexit the right way. We didn't do Brexit the right way. And never once has he said, what would have been the right way to do Brexit, Nigel? What would have been tell me the manufacturing policy, the investment policy, the trade policy, the foreign policy. Tell me, no, we just didn't do Brexit the right way. And it's like, it's like if I go up here and I go into the hallway and I take that vase that my wife really likes and I throw it onto the ground and it shatters and it's like completely broken. And she starts shouting at me and I go, well, look, it's because you didn't, that vase wasn't put together the right way. You know, don't blame me, don't blame me for breaking it. It was your fault. And that's where these folks still are. And by that, I don't think the conservatives are there now. I think under Kimmy Badenoch, I think they realize Brexit's a giant screw up. They won't say that publicly. I think they realize it. Lib Dems, of course, have always been towards Remain. I think Green has always been towards Remain. So where you're dealing with this now is politically, you're dealing this with reform as being like, when they're not doing their race baiting, it's reform that's still like, who needs Europe? Fly the England flag, whatever. But they don't have a sensible policy to back this up. They got a damn clue what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, they're following the point you made in our last discussion. It's just all spectacle, kind of like MAGA-like spectacle. And the one statement that Burnham said that I thought, you know what? I think he's the first politician who said it publicly like that the problem we have in the UK, that we talk too much and we do too little. And I'm like, yes, 100%. We talk too much. And like, I can't remember if I did it on a podcast or an event somewhere. I said, like, quite rudely, but I will never apologize for that. You know me. Where I said, I think for the UK really needs to shut the fuck up right now. Really get its head out of its ass and smell the real coffee, right? The world is changing. Everything is different. We need to act. None of the other politicians have done that. I personally know politicians, backbenchers at Labour, who are kind of saying the same thing. But they're hidden. The media doesn't want to talk to them, etc. I see them as the good guys, I guess. Hence, they're not in cabinet. So the fact that Burnham said that as an upcoming prime minister, I think that's a good thing. Which means now he absolutely must deliver, or he will absolutely destroy the Labour Party. I mean, the reputation of the Labour Party will be dead in the waters.
Yeah, but what does it mean to act? See, that's going to be the key thing here.
Exactly.
Because one of the first things the media will do, and it's just the nature of the media, is they'll come in and they'll look at whether there's going to be who's in, who's out of the Burnham cabinet. So you're going to get all this personality politics rubbish that's going to come in, right? The media is going to be looking for immediate challenges and holes and problems and so on. He's got to get on the front foot, which is now what he did yesterday, which was interesting as a general idea, is all right, we're going to give more power back to the cities and the regions, right? And again, it's like you can play off that idea. Look what Manchester had done. Look what more cities can do if the central government, empowers them and so on. The problem here is ever since I moved to the UK in the 80s, I heard this idea of empowering the regions, even as government centralized power. I mean, Thatcher said it, even as she was like basically getting rid of the Greater London Council and reducing the powers of London Council. It was, here's regional development funds. Blair did the whole stunt as well, and we've had the northern projects. Look, you gotta back this up properly. You got to back this up in terms of what does it mean to give power back to the regions? What does it mean in terms of their budgets? What does it mean in terms of cooperation on infrastructure? What does it mean in terms of the balance between Westminster legislation and the autonomy that local authorities have? Because we've had a couple of major regional projects, of course, that have absolutely gone pear-shaped recently, like HS2, the rail network. Yep. And it's like, you can't afford screw-ups like this. So, you can see me hedging here. And I think I got to be honest with you. Part of the reason why I'm hedging is the Starmer cabinet was such a damn disappointment. They always were. And I'm just going to repeat the one thing I've said at loads of interviews. You get to hear me say it again. When you talk about acting and getting on the front foot, here's what you do not do. You do not go in and as your first action when you're starting someone say, oh, well, we're not going to rejoin the single market.
Yeah.
Like, okay. You just absolutely handcuffed yourself, bro.
Even though he said, by the way, he did say publicly, and in fact, one of the guests I had, Roger Wade, very well-known entrepreneur in DC, he held an event and Starmer told him in public, to his face, that he's going to sort out Brexit. And then and of course, after the elections, Roger was absolutely livid because he did a complete 180. So he actually promised it publicly. So, and I think that's one reason, again, one key reason people thought, you know what, you betrayed us, basically.
And I'm hoping that Burnham comes in and says, look, I'm open for discussions with the EU. Doesn't have to say we're going to rejoin the single market. But he says, I'm open for discussions on the EU across the whole board here in terms of what we've done. And he's going to need to do that as well, because the EU doesn't necessarily want the UK back in right now. I mean, they do not want that. And they're certainly not going to be, UK's not going to get back into the EU on the same terms it had before it left.
Yeah.
So you might as well realize that and get in it. And again, you could tell that my Brexit friends, and I've learned so many new names about myself in the past 24 hours. You tell my Brexit friends, you're like, I'm going to turn around, Brexit kids, and say this right now. That you tell me your big significant trade deals that you got, right, to cover for this. You didn't get that U.S. trade deal, did you? Now, that has, and this is actually to the credit of Labour, they did get the trade deal with India. Now, it still has to be fully confirmed. They have got the trade deal with India, which does make a difference. That does cover some of the damage that's taken place. But you got to go further. You got to get back. You got to get back into the European market. It's pretty straightforward.
Well, the thing is, you can't really secure any good deals with anybody when you're in a weaker position, right? And of course, like you said, Brexit Britain is not the same Britain that was in the EU, which had, again, for the Brexit lovers out there, not only that we had sovereignty, we had control. We actually had very powerful, we didn't just have a veto. Like, the UK could simply say no to something and the whole EU would literally not be able to do anything. I mean, well, that's the case with most members, but the UK had such significant power that the EU simply could not. I mean, we weren't actually the rule takers. We were the rule makers. Now we're the rule takers, like a bunch of losers that we are now, because we're outside the EU. And we've got no say whatsoever.
And remember that the EU has, and this is a very different EU from 2016. It is very different now because of the effect of Ukraine and what's taking place. Yeah. It used to be, okay, we're looking at the French-German axis. It's not that those two countries that are rolling everything because of the shift with Eastern European countries and Central European countries, some of whom are doing quite well economically. Again, one of my new friends comes in and goes, "Oh, the UK is doing better than any European country in terms of GDP growth." I said, "Yeah, really, bro? You want to look at that? Look at the 2026 projection. UK GDP projected to go up 1.1%, Poland 3.5%. Now, you tell me who's doing better coming out of that, right?" So both politically, because of the focus on Ukraine, and economically, there's a shift in the power relationships. There's a shift also because you can look up in terms of what's happening with the Scandinavian countries beyond the EU. Talk about talk about the Norway models and alternatives one. But the very fact that you've got Sweden and Finland coming in and joining NATO means that you've changed the military dynamic in Europe as well. Yeah. All of that's going to be on the table if when the UK re-engages with Europe in terms of what takes place. And it's interesting. The one thing where the UK has benefited, and I'll be interested to see what happens, and I'll tell you a bit of breaking news, because I find it very confusing. Ursula von der Leyen announces the 800 billion euro investment in defense production and investment. Now, there's a lot of UK firms about that are involved in that sector that can benefit. But then the UK makes a complete hash. Labour makes a complete hash of the defense investment review in terms of what it's going to do with defense. All of a sudden, Starmer comes out and announces in the past 24 hours, okay, I figured out the review. We're going to increase our defense spending by 15 billion pounds as of 2029. I'm going, why the hell didn't you say that a few weeks ago before John Healey refined as defense secretary? What were you playing at, son? So he may have given Burnham something helpfully here in terms of the fact that the UK looks like it's getting its act together on defense, which puts it in good with Europe. But I got to bring this all back around. You put more money into defense, where are you getting it from?
Exactly.
If you still got a hole in government revenues because of Brexit, where are you getting that money from? Folks, we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And all the promises that Burnham made as well, they'll need a lot of extra cash. And again, where is that coming from? And I think because, like, of course, I remember the referendum very clearly. I mean, the Remain campaign was such a crap campaign, like, because they weren't saying the benefits, right? Like, they were saying what would happen if we were to leave the EU, but rather they should have actually highlighted how the UK is actually benefiting and why the UK is in a better place being an EU member. And I think right now, again, Burnham has the opportunity of a lifetime to actually showcase, to say, hey, look, you guys, as in, British voters, you see that we're broke. Well, guess what? I've got a way for us to make a lot of money as a country, right? To generate revenue that helps us pay for the defense, helps us pay for the council housing that he promised that he wants to start building again for the first time since Thatcher.
Uh-huh.
So if he actually shows that the only way we can get this cash is by being in the EU, and I mean, you have to be an idiot to say, well, actually, no, we don't want that. Well, okay, so stay broke,
Yeah. And I think it's his only option. I got to be honest with you, because of the fact, okay, exactly. I know we still got 3 years, just under, but look, the economic issue isn't going to go away. There's not like, it's not like Boris's magic money tree rubbish. And I know it was originally said about Corbyn, but it was Boris that really played up the idea of, oh yeah, pots of gold just falling on our heads because of Brexit. That ain't the way it happened. So you have got to engage with this, because otherwise what's happened here is that power has become a poison chalice. Whichever party comes into power is just going to be saddled with this economic issue. And indeed, I can remember that while I was hoping against hope it'd get better, I remember thinking that back in 24, which is, all right, Labour, you got a 400 plus majority in the Commons, but you just got handed this economy, folks. And if you don't do something big and different, you just watch yourself be, slowly that power is going to ebb away, which is where we are now. Now, I'd love to see Starmer do this as well. I'd love to see Burnham do this as well. And especially with Shabana Mahmood, our good, right Labour minister. I'd love to see Burnham come and say, look, you want to deal with the issue of immigration and so on. You want to deal with refugees and such. We need to get back to border cooperation with Europe. And border cooperation with Europe is not some ad hoc arrangement with the French over the channel. Mm-hmm. Border cooperation with Europe is to talk about getting back into the institutions that the UK was in before 2020, which did handle border security. And I just happened to say this because every time now we now make vacation plans, we've got to look at how many folks, from the UK are on the flight to calculate how long we're going to have to queue up when we come back in through passport checks, just because all you Brits can complicate it for the rest of us.
Yeah.
By pulling out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so, because I think really the only way, I mean, he obviously started doing this messaging that is all about hope, fixing the country, etc. And I think this goes back to my point that I think he should do exact opposite of what the Remain campaigners have done. So instead of being which is actually the mistake I think that Starmer made when he was elected, that he said, oh, we're in a really bad place. The economy is terrible. The Tories destroyed everything. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? That's the way he failed. So perhaps now, I think, if anybody from Labour is listening, right, please, make sure that you actually push the right message and say, look, you guys are worried about immigration. Well, guess what? Being in the EU will allow us to control that. There'll be no boats, right? We never had any boats issues when we were in the EU. That tells you something, right? If you want more money, EU. If you want opportunities, etc. Highlight how many businesses shut down as a direct result of Brexit. That's a lot of businesses. Highlight the fact that the UK lost, on average, I can't remember, there's a crazy figure that in the last, since we actually left, which is 2020, 2021? The official
2020 we formally came out. Yeah,
2020,
we officially came out 2020.
Exactly. The UK almost lost £1 trillion worth of GDP in total. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Well, you
highlight these things that people listen.
Yeah. Before we talk Iran, you remember Monty Python and Monty Python's Life of Brian, right?
Oh,
you
yes. I love it.
You remember, okay, so you remember the, like, what is it, the People's Front of Judea or the People's Front going, what have the Romans ever done for us? Whatever. It's like, labor do the same thing. Well, yeah, what did Europe do for you? Well, there was cooperation in education, which I personally benefited from, between higher education institutions. Cooperation in research. Yeah, that was pretty important. Cooperation in regional development funds, a lot of which came from the EU. Cooperation in agricultural development funds, some of which came from the EU. Cooperation, as I mentioned, in terms of security arrangements, where you're talking about from the EU. Cooperation in terms of tourism and hospitality sectors, which in part was because of the mobility of workers from the EU who helped build the sector. Support for the NHS and care workers, care sectors, again, because of EU labor. And, I could keep you here for the full hour talking about the benefits. Now, I know the EU can be a pain in the backside in terms of it takes time to get things done. You got to get 28 countries, as it was then, to agree and all of that. But things did get done. And I'm going to add one other thing. I'm just going to look at here. And that is, I was in a debate I was an analyst on a debate which was Polish TV station, TVP World. Because as I said, they're big EU folks out there now. And they made the pointed comment, look at how many countries are wanting to come into the EU. Come further into it. And we are talking about, there's another, the EU's at 27. There's another 12 countries that are on various stages of candidacy. They should come in, right? And then, so you got 12 wanting to come in. How many countries in the history of the EU have left? One. Now, think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that. Why would countries want to come into the EU and only one would want to go out?
Yeah, it tells you something. Yeah. But, well, in the eyes of some, that means you're an outlier, therefore you're a genius. But there's also an outlier that you're a jackass. It's like, they're both outliers. So, unfortunately,
look, and again, we have to talk to Iran. So basically, I'm going to take, because this stuck, look, I'm going to take you back to 2016. The one thing that stuck in my head, and it's like, okay, you guys are going to go down this path. It's when Farage stands up. This is our Independence Day. This is our Independence Day. And I'm going, no way, son. Independence Day was July the 4th, and that's coming up real soon, and that was in 1776. Don't you take that away from us. The idea that this is Independence Day, and no, it's not like the movie either, where you're going to wind up triumphant at the end. You pumped up 5 million quid guy, and I think it's appropriate. I think it's appropriate now that Nigel's gotten 5 million from cryptocurrency, Christopher Harborn, because it's like Brexit is just basically like the cryptocurrency of international politics, that somehow, from some harebrained scheme that you cooked up inside your tiny head, right? You think everybody's going to benefit when there are going to be a few that benefit at the very top, and everybody else are going to get taken as a sucker.
Absolutely. And speaking of suckers, this is exactly where what brings us back to Iran and the MAGA movement, because I always like to remind people that I'm not a political expert like you, Scott, but even I call this out in 2024, that the very people that brought us Brexit are the brains behind the second term MAGA movement, with Project 2025. And I did say even at the time that if you guys think the shit show we had here in the UK was bad, well, they learned lessons and they're going to be ransacking the United States and the American people in a way that is just unprecedented. And even then, I did not think it would be this bad. And I had a lot of Americans that would say, tell me, Brit, you're kind of like, they say, oh, you're an American guy. What the hell do you know about Brexit? And then they came to me, are you Brit, European, whatever? What the hell do you know about America? It's not about knowing about the country, people. It's common sense. Sense. It's really that simple, which of course now we are all suffering the consequence of that with the Iran war. That is just not going away, Scott. As we predicted, this guy will never accept defeat. I mean, people, the media go on about, they've got an agreement or whatever. I'm like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And I have a theory, which I'm going to share with you at the end, as we start talking about the second major war that Trump started with algae. We'll come back to that, ladies and gentlemen, towards the end. But I've got a thought about that as well. But let's just for the listeners to be updated with the Iran situation, because we're back to square one again, aren't we? They're all bombing each other all over the place.
They're skirmishes. I mean, if you want to find like a bit of upside, it's not an all-out war. It's not like the first just over 5 weeks. Because once we got the ceasefire on April 7th, that meant that you didn't get the mass airstrikes and the targeted assassinations inside Iran, and you didn't get the widespread Iranian retaliation across the Gulf states. Now, what happens now is that the real focus here is the Strait of Hormuz, which is the Iranians control it. The Americans want to break the control of the Strait of Hormuz, despite the fact that they have signed a memorandum of understanding, which actually gives Iran the management of the strait. The Americans want to break it. And so what happens is that you get these skirmishes. Just to put it up to you, where we are right now. So I'm speaking to you here on Tuesday. Where we are right now is that even as we have talks that are not talks in Qatar today, the Iranians are like, no, this isn't going to go back to where it was before February 28th. This is not going to be open to everybody free of charge under the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. We're going to run this thing. The Americans in the memorandum of understanding effectively agreed that there will be a new system in which the Iranians will be involved, but they don't like that, right? So they're trying to break the system by running shipping along the coast of Oman, which lies to the south of the strait. Iran is to the north. And a couple of times in recent days, the Iranians have taken, drones and attacked a couple of ships and said, you didn't get clearance to go through this. You had to go through our procedures. And when they've done that, then the American naval forces there lob in a few missiles, and they hit Iranian drone sites and they hit other military facilities on the southern coast. And everybody thinks for 24, 48 hours, is it going to escalate? Is it going to escalate? And then both sides kind of step back. Because if they do escalate it, then it's just, all out, basically chaos. We're back to where we were early April. You can guess what's going to happen to oil and gas prices again. The talks are going to be completely scuppered. So we're in this limbo because while those skirmishes are going on, the fundamental here is, look, Iran has set the priority of Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you do not agree that they have a role in controlling it, they're not going to reach a deal with you on it. And if they're not going to reach a deal with you on it, they're going to continue to have control of it. Okay? Yeah. All right? So you got two options. You either let them have control, but no deal, or you reach a deal. Okay? If you want to reach a deal, you have got to give them financial benefits. You will have to reduce sanctions on their oil exports, so they'll get billions of dollars from that. You will have to unfreeze some of their assets. And already the Iranians have gotten, and I've been told this from reliable people, they've already gotten $3 billion from UAE. Just don't attack us anymore. And they go, okay. They are indicating they've gotten $6 billion from Qatar, or about to get it, but they would formally get more of their assets unfrozen. And then they would get this private investment reconstruction fund, at least in principle, $300 billion. Although who's going to put the money into it is up in the air, because Trump has effectively said it's going to be the Gulf states. And the Gulf states are like, what? What are you doing? Why are you making us do this? Right? But Iran gets those financial benefits. They get the lifting of the U.S. naval blockade. You get them. And then they'll talk about the nuclear program. But if you look at the statements that come out already, what you know is the Americans have already made a concession on that. The Trump folks were saying, no more Iran nuclear program, no more enrichment of uranium. We're going to stop it. We're going to stop it entirely. No more. Now what they say is Iran's not going to have a nuclear weapon. Well, Iran never had a nuclear weapon. And Iran might have had breakout capability to get a nuclear weapon, but they never had one. What Iran has maneuvered for is that they will still be able to enrich uranium at a lower level. So not 60%, not 20%, maybe even lower than that. Oh, sorry, maybe 20%, maybe even lower than that. And they'll do it for their civilian program. And they'll carry out what we call downblending, diluting the 60% uranium inside the country, not outside, right? So the Americans are kind of giving ground on that as well, although it has to be worked out on a later stage of the talks. So the Iranians kind of set up everything. Now, how do you break that if you're the Trump folks? I mean, seriously, how do you break that? And I can't. What you can do is you can make the Iranians wait. So you make them wait and say, look, you're not going to get a long-term lifting of the sanctions. You're not going to get an unfreezing of all of the assets until we are very sure that the Strait of Hormuz is opened. But that is the exchange. The nuclear program is not the exchange here that's involved in. And then, of course, the other complication for the Trump folks, and it's a complication for the Iranians as well, is that, the Israelis are, carrying out the military operations to occupy southern Lebanon. And it's like, well, do you accept that? The Trump folks will. That's clear because they'll buy the Israeli line that we're pushing back Hezbollah. And I think the Iranians actually will probably swallow hard and say, okay, as long as Israel occupies 6% of Lebanon, which is what we're looking at, and they don't attack the other 94% in the longer run, we'll live with that for the moment if we get a deal. So, there's elements of landing points. I can see where the landing points are, but it requires the Trump folks pretending that they've won, but having to make concessions. And I'll just tell you the latest because it was just farcical this week. So every time that the Trump folks are like, we're going to get talks, we're going to get high-powered talks, the Iranians pull the rug out from under them and they raise the price. Right? So there were supposed to be technical talks this week. This followed Uncle JD going out to Switzerland, just over a week ago. Look at me, completely distorting what it was discussed there because he's Uncle JD and he wants to be president. And then there's supposed to be technical talks to actually sort out what's actually on the table. Well, of course, you had this skirmish in the Strait of Hormuz. So the Americans are like, okay, we're going to send real estate developer Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner out to Qatar. And they've gone out there today. And the Iranians go, okay, we're not meeting them. Nope, sorry. We're not going to talk to them. We'll have low-level officials there that will discuss some technical stuff, but we're not going to meet these guys, right? Yeah. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, if you want us to meet real estate developer Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner or Uncle JD again, it's going to cost you a bit more, right? They'll push the terms a bit harder on what's being negotiated on the table. And remember that if the Trump folks say, no, we're not going to negotiate, okay, what's your alternative? You're going to go to war? You're going to go back to war again? Because you know what's going to do to the domestic economy. And you know that I think it's more than 70% of Americans now think the war was a mistake, right? Yeah. Good luck.
And we've seen that even the reaction after the whole announcement of the memorandum of understanding, like a lot of the Trump Republicans and politicians, they were very angry with that. And rightly so. They did say effectively, America gave in. It's like America's not getting anything out of this, which like I mentioned before we recorded that I had this weird thought in my head because people have been saying since 2016 that Trump was a Russian stooge because he just seemed to be giving everything away to Putin or whatever, right? And then, of course, more recently, it's the same thing about Netanyahu. He's giving everything away to the Israelis, etc. And now he seems to be giving everything away to the Iranians. So, of course, does that mean he's an Iranian stooge? And I thought to myself, maybe he's no one's stooge. The guy's just pretty shit at making deals. There's no art of the deal, but it's more like the guy. I mean, at the end of the day, I think, is he the only guy in history that bankrupted his own casinos? So maybe he's the stooge of his own pockets. You know what I mean? Like he's like, I don't really care if anything collapses so long as I line up my pockets, I line up my friends' pockets, my family's pockets. Yeah. Even if my own company dies, I don't care. If my own country dies, I don't care. I think this is probably it. He doesn't give a shit.
I'm going to say something really strange here, and that is I think he's actually succeeded with some of the deals. He is a bad businessman, by the way. I mean, he's expanded. But look where he succeeded. And let's put this in the wider context. He succeeded with Venezuela, right? because he got rid of their president and he got regime accommodation. But we still don't know the details of the economic deals that are there. We keep being told U.S. oil companies are going to go into the Venezuelan oil industry and so on. Well, that's a process that takes quite a bit of time, folks. So we still don't know the deals that are being cut. Now, I do think he may be making some personal money off of Venezuela. There's various ways that could have happened, right? But in terms of, U.S. economic interests, no, I don't think he succeeded there, but he gets a bit of a win there. He got a win with the tariffs to an extent, right? Although he got a win against himself. I mean, at the end, if you think that the landing point with the EU, for example, is 15% tariffs, right? But think about what that victory means. Just a quick reminder, everybody, who pays the 15% tariffs first and foremost? It's Americans, right?
Yep.
So his victory was on the back of Americans who he wants to vote for him. And he only got really a victory out of that in the sense of getting a 15 because he finally stopped ranting and raving about Europe and threatening to jack the tariffs up to 25, 50, 75, et cetera. So they've got a landing point on tariffs that they can try to claim as a victory. But it's, again, you have to remember that even that 15% victory you got with the EU has now been suspended for the moment because of the question of the legal authority that he has and whether he's abused it. So, Trump sometimes succeeds in being a bully. But the further we get into this administration, the thing that once a bully loses, then he's on a slippery slope down, right? And what has happened with Iran is people are looking at Trump and they're going, dude, you lost, man. You lost. You did not, you completely wailed on. I mean, you just damaged everything. Hundreds of billions of dollars in damage in Iran. Yeah. You still haven't got them to surrender. So, what happens the next time is, I'm going to go take Greenland. No, you're not. And you're not going to bomb Greenland, you joker. If he decide, the thing to watch is Cuba. Are they going to now make the play, which is, they're going to say, Cuba, you better knuckle under, or else we're going to hit you hard. And I think that is a serious prospect now, because I think the thing is, a bully, when he loses, is on a slippery slope down, but somehow he tries to correct that by punching someone else in the nose. So we'll see. But for right now, no, look, let's just take it over really quick. They fouled the nest with Europe again, because Europe realizes that the Trump administration is not a reliable security partner. They fouled the nest with the Chinese because the Chinese are looking at them going, really? Really? This is the way you're going to demonstrate that you're a global power? Yeah. They have really fouled the nest with the Gulf states. And that, I think, is going to be a potentially historic realignment, given that for decades, U.S. foreign policy was, we provide for the security of the Gulf states, and that's where you get them as part of the global economy with the oil, the gas. We sell them arms in exchange for all those, get some of those petrodollars back that they accumulate. And everybody's on a win-win. Well, now it's not. Gulf states are like, you let us get beat up. So we'll think twice before we decide, whether we go back into that relationship for the long term.
And you just alluded to how he, being a bully, etc., that he tries to kind of pick up fights with other entities as a way of covering up whatever's going on in Iran. And of course, let's not forget the Epstein files. That's still a thing. It's still happening. So to probably cover this up, and there's some weird things keep on emerging. But the Supreme Court, absolutely landed a few bombshells, which is again, you could probably explain it better, but to me, just they are making the USA a banana republic even more, and it already has become a banana republic.
Things have cut both ways. We've had, the decisions over the past 48 hours have just been, it's just been huge. We've been waiting for them for months in some cases. Now, the upside for the Trump administration, first of all, is that the Supreme Court has made the ruling that people with transgender identity cannot participate in women's sports, right? So transgender females cannot participate in women's sports. In fact, in the ruling may actually be that transgender people can't participate in single-sex sports. I need to double check. But of course, the big thing is whether transgender females can compete. And the Supreme Court, along conservative lines, we saw it was going to happen, have come down and said, actually, I shouldn't say this. There are technicalities to the ruling, but effectively what the state Supreme Court did, and it wasn't just the conservative justice said, look, states are able to make this decision. We're not going to intrude on the rights of states to decide whether or not transgender athletes can be involved in sports. And about 29 U.S. states ban or severely limit transgender athletes being involved in that. So that's a knock. That's a hit. I mean, I need to talk to you with that issue because it's so fouled up with rhetoric, with the misleading, in fact, the false statement, men playing women's sports. That's not what is happening here.
No.
But there is an issue here, and there has been for many years. I could talk to you about it, which is where do you get the balance between transgender athletes and women in the same sporting event? The International Olympic Committee has been dealing with this for years. So have national committees. But anyway, the Supreme Court gives Trump, his yap social media victory, no men in women's sports. They also, I think, and this ruling has not picked up enough significance yet. It's only been a few hours, but serious. They lifted the Watergate era restrictions on political parties fundraising, and that's bad. That's really bad. That the courts had already gutted subsequent decisions over campaign finance that had been early 21st century rulings, and now it just becomes a free for all on the type of dark money, shady money that can go in. So that's not good, to say the least. There's a horrible decision which allows Trump to fire people from federal commissions. I think it was a Federal Trade Commission commissioner brought the case that, unfair, you just can't just simply summary dismiss it. And the Supreme Court's like, yeah, executive authority is, yeah, I can do that. They drew the line, interestingly, however. The one place where you can't fire someone just like that is the Federal Reserve. So it's like, okay.
That's the one that he wanted to fire.
And the reason why they did it is because the Federal Reserve has an independence from the executive branch. It wasn't just protecting capitalism, the court. It has an independence. They effectively ruled that the commissioners are all part of the executive branch. So yeah, he can, he doesn't have to observe proper labor law. He can just chuck them. So all of that's down. But then you go on the flip side of this here, and the massive decision that came down today was that the Trump administration cannot deny birthright citizenship. Now, what this goes back to the 14th Amendment. And in fact, it's a bedrock that has been in the U.S. Constitution and reaffirmed by precedent since the 1860s. Reaffirmed on several occasions by the Supreme Court, which is if you were born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States, right? Or if you are born, if you're born to a U.S. parent abroad, you're a citizen of the United States. Both my two children are American citizens because, even though they were born in the UK. And that is the nature of the idea. What makes you an American? Well, what makes you American is if you're born in this country, your parents had come there, they had settled there, and so on. So, now, there's all kinds of snapping that there has been abuse of the system by people, and you'll hear the Chinese who come in so they can have children born in there and so on.
Yeah.
That's not the legal issue, folks. The legal issue here is that if you're born in the U.S., you're a U.S. citizen. And what was interesting is that this was a 6-3 decision. 3 conservative justices joined the 3 moderate justices in supporting this. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, wrote the main opinion. He was joined by Amy Coney Barrett, and then Brett Kavanaugh wrote a concurring opinion, which was a bit of a strange opinion, but I'll leave that for a moment. They side and they say, look, we're not going to deny birthright citizenship. And then you had Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, who almost always vote with the Trump folks, and Neil Gorsuch. And what I found interesting is that Alito and then Clarence Thomas, in a 91-page dissenting opinion, I have not read all of it. I've read a bit of it. But they didn't argue it on legal grounds. They argued it on political grounds, which was we can't allow people to keep coming in and having children in the United States. I'm going, dude, that's not a legal argument. That's a political argument that you're making, right? Yeah. And what was interesting is when Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, I love Mike Johnson because the guy is just like still searching for his spine. It's like, and so he's walking out the corridors, and the folks say, oh, the Supreme Court decision just dropped, and he's looking really nervous. And then they say they've upheld birthright citizenship, and he's like this. He's going, this is a traditional originalist. This must be a traditional originalist interpretation of the Constitution, which doesn't take account of the politics. Dude, an originalist interpretation of the Constitution is the Constitution, right? Yeah. That's what you're saying. And what you're saying is they should have pushed aside the Constitution for this chicane. And so at least the Supreme Court held the line on that. So it's not, by and large, the Supreme Court has played to Trump, but they do so in their own view of what the law is. They're not like complete political puppets. This is one case where it didn't go Trump's way. He hasn't commented yet. Essentially, he's commented on the other cases. He has not commented on this one. And I'm waiting to see if he will or if he pretends that it didn't happen. But I'll tell you this right now, Stephen Miller, the Dark Prince, the Dark Prince of xenophobia is going to be sitting there scribbling tonight in his lair going, okay, what new regulations can I have to try to deport people and to strip legal immigrants of their right to stay? Because that's just the way he is.
Truth. Despicable character, that's for sure. But it's interesting, the money bit, doesn't that then allow the Democrats to start accepting dirty, dark money?
Yeah, of course. It's free for all. It does.
That's not good at all.
But it does. Yeah. But the problem is, Chris, American politics is just like this endless cycle of raising money. Because remember, people in the House have to run every 2 years. So they're not really governing to say so. They're just like, as soon as they get reelected, they got to start on the hamster wheel again of raising more money for the next one. Presidential races have backed up further and further. Folks who are going to run for president at 28 are already fundraising.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and we started off by talking about Mamdani, that space to actually get up there and say, I'm a politician of values and of action. Instead of a politician who has to go out and say something to get the donors to give them money, it's harder and harder to defend that. And the Supreme Court just made it even more difficult. But we'll see. Anyway, should we talk algae before we go? My favorite story of the past couple of weeks.
Let's go for it. As a biologist, I mean, I love algae, so let's go for it.
And actually I've done, it's a little bit of an old story now. So many folks come and say, oh, that's all, we knew that a few days ago, but it's still fun to recap this and so on and to rant this and then to update you on where we are, because I'm going to widen this out to Trump Ego Fest 250. And so Trump Ego Fest 250 was already in a bit of trouble because the courts can be good. Courts made him take his name off the Kennedy Performing Center for the Performing Arts. So, to which he then put a tarp up around it so nobody could see that his name was being taken down. And then his ballroom, which actually is going to have public money. It wasn't all funded by private donors. Who would have thought that? Then Congress said, well, we're not going to fund it as part of other appropriations bills. So he's in a spot of bother on that, even though you still have a destroyed White House with the East Wing in rubble. Then we come up to the reflecting pool. It's like, the canceled country and western, canceled music festival that was supposed to take place a few days, and that went by the boards because everybody realized it was just a Trump ego fest, and so they all pulled out. So you get a transportation secretary, Sean Duffy, in front of a chorus, and good on him for singing, good on you being there. And Sean Duffy going, "That's what you've shown the libtards. You've shown the libtards." And I'm going, okay, that's what America 250 is. You showing the libtards? Good on you, Sean. Who is a reality TV star, by the way. Look that up. And that's about all he's ever achieved. Damn it. Anyway, we get to the reflecting pool, and $14.7 million with an M. At least it's not billion. And Trump gives it on a no bid process to some guy who's done his swimming pools and his golf courses in the past, right? And this guy lays down this lining in American flag blue, which doesn't reflect. And then it starts to come up at the seams. Now, the algae, that's just God. That's just God having a joke with Trump, because the algae, as I understand it, your biologist, is in certain times of the year, you get conditions, right? And you get algae blooms, which take place. And Trump's mistake was pretending that there would never be an algae bloom, and the reflecting pool would always be American flag blue instead of deep algae green, which is what has happened. So now they got the algae bloom, and now they got the lining coming up from the bottom, right? And you got people who are looking, and they're seeing this lining floating in. So now these guys are really embarrassed. And then you get this story. It's Antifa. It's Antifa. I have to say this. I've said it on a few other interviews, so forgive me for recycling it. Antifa is not an organization.
Yeah.
Okay. It is an idea. It is anti-fascist action. Now, you people who are pro-fascist, you may hate that, but it is an idea. So Antifa did not come up at one of their meetings and go, how are we going to upset Trump? We're going to rip the lining of his reflecting pool, right? And we're going to rip it up. They did not come out in black balaclavas and so on. And you know the reason why I know this? I will repeat this. In fact, Antifa didn't rip up your pool. No one else ripped up your pool because there is CCTV on your pool. And how do I know there's CCTV? Because you can watch it on live stream on your computer. It is a reflecting pool outside the Lincoln Memorial. And you can go back and look, did anybody use box cutters to cut a 350-foot gash in the reflecting pool? That's more than American football field long. Did they do it? No, there's no one on there on it. So don't go around giving me that. And then, of course, the serious side of it is because they're so damn embarrassed, they arrest. It was 8 people. Now they're saying 7. They've arrested people and said they could be put in prison for up to 20 years. And the one story of this guy, this guy, I think David Hearn was his name, this Olympic cyclist. He's 67 now, right? But he still cycles 52 miles. And he goes by the reflecting pool on his 52-mile bike ride, and he sees a bit of the lining up there, and he picks it up to look at it. Ooh. He gets arrested because supposedly he's sabotaging the reflecting pool. And that's how far these guys will go. And so I'm talking to you on June the 30th in 4 days. If that reflecting pool is still green, man, no telling. Now, here's the sequel. Because you guys follow me on my channel, I've told that reflecting pool story version of it. But here's fresh material. I love this one. Over the weekend, they had America's State Fair. Now, anybody who's grown up in America will know about state fairs. I love state fairs. When I was a boy, my grandfather, the assistant police chief of Lexington, Kentucky, he'd go out there and he'd supervise the police arrangements for the state fair out in Lexington. I figured guys loved going there, right? It's great. And that's a good thing. And I really like it. Anyway, Trump, as part of Trump's Ego Fest, is going to be Trump State Fair out there, right? Mm-hmm. And so they got like the Washington Mall, and you could see this, right? In the camera. And you got Fox TV out there to say how wonderful it is. And like big energy, huge energy. Look at all the huge energy out there. And they're saying this with a camera showing the mall with like 2 people on it, maybe 3. A dog. And there's a dog. And that's it. That's all that's out there on the state mall. And then they have a band playing like, My Country 'Tis of Thee. And it's like, and they call it like, Trump's favorite Marine band. It's like, and they're playing it in front of an empty mall. And then the Fox TV people going, that was beautiful. The crowds love this. I'm going, no, the crowds didn't love this because the crowds aren't there. And so final, I think the state fair is finally over. I think even Fox had to admit this isn't working out. We'll go to a news item about water squirting out of someone's eyeballs or whatever Fox TV does to get ratings these days. They used to do stories like that, not making it up. So anyway, that's where we are with this 4 days before July the 4th. And of course, the serious side of this is it should be a celebration, man. America's flawed. America's a flawed country, but there are ideas there. There are good ideas there. And there are people who have gone to America because of those ideas. And they have, been better because of that. And there are people who still believe in those ideas. So this is your 250th anniversary. That's what it should be. Instead of this orange-faced narcissist who thinks it's got to be all about him or else it doesn't exist. So by the time you and I talk 2 weeks from now, God knows what stories I'll have from you in terms of what's happened there and so on. But, hey, look, all that matters is that for this weekend, there will be a NASCAR stock car race, and that's all that matters. You go watch your stock car racing on July the 4th, and the world will be okay.
Or just, I guess, to end it, I just want people to imagine if Kamala Harris was the president. Imagine the celebrations that we would have for the 250th anniversary of the US, the celebrations of the World Cup, because the World Cup is not going very well. I mean, like, of course, on TV, you see all the, the games are progressing nicely in general. But there's a lot of issues. I mean, it's not succeeding. There's a lot of money being lost. So imagine if Kamala Harris, and I'm not necessarily a big fan in a sense, because she was a little bit, she was kind of like Starmer, right? But regardless, right? Just imagine what the world would be like today. There would be no Iran war. The celebrations in USA would have been pretty spectacular, I would say. The World Cup would have been more spectacular. Just a thought.
I'm not sure, Tim.
Really?
I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah, I'm wondering if the vibe, I don't want to think the vibe is gone. I think he can come back, but I'm not sure it would have come back by now. I'm going to flash back to that Washington Mall in 2009. And again, I've told this story. It's going to be part of the book that I'm writing, because it's important to flash back to 2009 when he tried to explain Trump. It was 1.5 million that were out there on the Washington Mall for the Obama inauguration. And that, I watched it live, man. And that was the moment. That was the moment. If if you grew up in the American South like I did, and if you grow up fearing black people, like I did, I swear to God, and I don't like saying that, but I do. You grow up with that as part of like your culture. You cross to the other side of the street if you have black folks. As a boy, and far too many years, I still had that idea because you grow up with that. Now here I am coming out of the American South, and you got a black American who's become president, and people are celebrating it. That was a joyous moment. I had problems with his speech. There was some bad stuff in the speech in terms of what might happen in Afghanistan, but I'm going to leave that aside. Most of the speech was all about hope and unity, and the idea. Look at what I've achieved, and I tell you that because a couple of weeks ago when Trump had that cage fight, on the White House lawn, 4 days later, there's a very different event for the Obama Presidential Library, and both the Obamas give absolutely wonderful speeches in terms of this showed what is possible. So you still have that, right? But the reason why I worry about it is, Tim, is that I can remember, that even if Harris had won the 24 election, you've got this damaged political culture because Trump would have said the election was rigged. Swear to God, he would have said it was rigged. And there are enough people that would have bought into that crap. And there would have been enough legislators, Republicans up on the Hill, that would have bought into that crap, that they would have kept it going. They would have played the politics of division. And to play the politics of division, they would have come after Harris as like the worst example of DEI. And again, I'm going to remind folks out there, what's wrong with diversity? What's wrong with equality? What's wrong with inclusion? They would have held her up as being the woke president. I'm going to remind people out there, what's wrong with woke, which means politically and socially aware. They would have done all this. That latent racism would have been there. That latent misogyny would have been there as a black woman in charge. And we had a window of 2 years in the States. It was in between all the chaos and disruption and damage of the Bush years following 9/11 and the war in Iraq. And before, we had 2 years. Before then, it goes really pear-shaped because of gridlock and social media. And in those 2 years, Obama's first 2 years, you get Obamacare through. And that's not and there were Republicans that supported that going through, right? You get the rescue package coming out of the Great Recession, the Great Financial Crisis.
Yeah.
And I know we can take issue with some aspects of that, with the banks and the corporations supporting it, but we got that passed to prevent, economic meltdown. And we got in some environmental regulations that needed to be put back into board, and we got some move towards women's rights being aboard. And then even that momentum even made its way into a court. Think about this, a Supreme Court, and this would not happen with the Supreme Court today, which legalized same-sex marriage, right? We got that. We had that 2-year window, and then the politics of division kicked back in. It happened with Mitch McConnell, who was one of the most damaging figures in American politics. He's very different now, but then, man, he really damaging. Who said, look, I'm going to block everything that comes block everything that comes across, right? That means nothing can really get done in a forthright manner that takes place. It means Obama wanted to get, the consolidation of the status of the dreamers, the children of the undocumented immigrants who, had come to the United States. That would have, think about what that would have done in terms of mood if that had gone through.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get through. And then you get this snake oil salesman in 2016 who's not talking about the issues. He's not talking about this. He's just coming in there and playing that politics of division and that politics of hatred and that politics of spectacle. So I'm not sure we would have recovered by now. And I'm waiting for that moment of recovery. And it does. It has to get really, I hate to say this, it has to get dark before you get recovery. And we need to realize that. We need to hold on to hope, but we know it has to get dark. When I was a boy, it had to get really dark, in a sense, with the combination of, it had to get dark in terms of, even when I was born, it had to get dark in terms of how much violence there was against people of color before you get the civil rights movement. And then it has to get dark with Vietnam and Watergate. And then you get that window of, we get rid of Nixon, which, J.D. Vance this past week saying, oh God, Watergate would have been a 12-hour story. Who cares about corruption? Who cares about abuse of the law? But, on a bipartisan movement said he has to be held accountable. But then, of course, we get a few years before Reagan comes back in with that politics of division. It comes in there. Then, all right, fine. We finally come out of the Cold War and you get that moment in the 90s. And I've got mixed feelings about Clinton. But in retrospect, it looks a lot better than it was then. You get all of that. And then we have to go through the darkness of 9/11 and all of that before we get Obama that comes through, that cycles through. Okay. We had the darkness of COVID, where at least Trump didn't win in 2020. So America got to its senses, despite the fact that it was so divided as a country that took place. We're in a very dark place in the States right now. And how much darker does it have to become before people say we're just not going to stand for this? And I don't know the answer to that question. This is where you start. No responsible analyst should come out and predict when it's going to happen because the stakes are too high. But you are at the point now where what makes this difference is that in the past I kept talking about the American system bending, and it bent. It bent in 2016 when the Russians interfered, and when you had Comey making that, the FBI director making that disastrous mistake. I'm going to open up an investigation of Hillary's emails just before the election takes place and all that. So it bent then. The American system bent during Trump's first term to try to rip it up. But now it's not a question of bending, it's a question of whether it breaks. It's a question of breaks because they tried to break the government in the first few months and they have damaged it pretty badly. They now are trying to break the electoral process. And I don't mean by not having elections entirely. I mean by just, it is legal manipulation that we're talking about here with the redistricting. And then underhand move. They're not underhand moves. Moves like, for example, blocking mail-in ballots being put through the pubs. That's the point that you're at, because there needs to be a reminder here. The point where the American system was at its greatest moment of crisis before now was January 6, 2021.
Yeah.
That was a coup attempt. And the thing here is I actually look almost 6 years later. Sorry, I've gone on a bit today. I apologize. It's going to run your
that's fine.
broadcast.
I think it's an important discussion that we have today because it really connected a lot of dots.
Well, and I look at this, we're now we're going on 5.5 years after that, and instead of people looking back at that and calling it out for a coup attempt, some people do, but instead of the system calling it out, well, the guy who led the coup attempt heads up the system, So the system's not going to call it out. So every time he has an appointee for Justice Department or he has an appointee, one of his judges comes before a congressional committee, do you recognize that Joe Biden won the 2020 election? Or that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election? Oh, there was an electoral process. Do you recognize that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election? Oh, no, there was an electoral process. Do you recognize that Joe Biden won the 2020 election? Well, Congress did certify him as the election, but do you recognize he won? And they won't answer it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, why don't you call out January 6th? I mean, that is an invasion of the Capitol. That's what it was. Whether or not Trump directly incited it, and I'm just up to writing the January 6th, 2021 chapter in the book, and I'm like, okay, how far am I going to run with this? But I think there's an argument here that he incited this as well. You're excusing that violence against the Capitol to keep someone in office who had lost the election. So if 28 comes around, and hopefully we will have a 2028 presidential election, but a Democrat wins in 28, whoever it is, are you then going to say, we're not going to recognize that election? We're not going to recognize the Democrats winning it. How low will you go? If I know how low the Trumpist will go. How low will you go if you're a Republican who's not a Trumpist? That I think is a key question at that point. And how many good Americans are going to rally around who are not Democrats or Republicans and just say, this is bigger than your two parties, folks. This is absolutely bigger than that. And I say that, and I'll do this as a close. And I'll tell you this, I got two kids who I adore. You know that. One of them lives in the Netherlands and is making a great career out there. He's got a great partner. They get married next year. And, I'm a happy guy, right? He won't step foot in the U.S. I know he won't step foot in the U.S. And in fact, he just washes his hands of anything to do with that country. And he's half American, That's what it is. You got a daughter who's in the UK. Cherish her. She would love to go to the United States. She would love to visit her grandmother. She would love to spend their time there. She won't do it. She won't do it because she's too frightened by what America has become. Right? And it's like, I can't as her father order her to go over there.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be able to go back to America and to see something good out of it. I want them to see something good out of it. That's should be their heritage. That should be part of them, even if they've grown up outside the United States. And it should be there for every single American, that you don't have to base your entire life on who you hate, who frustrates you, who you want to put down, who you want to insult. That shouldn't be what your America is. It's what Zohran Mamdani said, to bring this all the way back around where we started. This should be your community, your city, not just New York, not Philadelphia, Boston, San Francisco, Des Moines, Iowa, Austin, Texas, Houston, Texas. This should be your city. This should be your state. This should be your country that you're proud of, not because of an empty slogan, make America great again, but because you all have done something to make yourselves proud.
No, amen to that. And that's the same actually goes to the UK. Like, it's not about pro-Brexit, anti-Brexit. I mean, how about if we prioritize the future of our country that we've destroyed? Like, I say this quite publicly, that we've got a lost decade because of Brexit and the Brexiteers. And I agree with, I think it was Donald Tusk who said that these people brought us Brexit. They've got a special place in hell. I'm not a religious person, but boy, I do hope they do have a special place in hell, because they've destroyed this country too. So like the MAGA movement.
Yeah, but remember, Tim, let's always go with the upside. What you talked about earlier in this part, right? Let's go with the upside.
Yeah.
Look, I'm old enough to remember Britain has got a lot to be proud of. You have got generations of people, not just people who were born here, but generations who have come here because there was the prospect of a better life in Britain. And now, I know there's a very checkered history, right? But you talked to me about the Windrush generation who came over from the West Indies. You talked about what they brought into the country. You talk about the people from South Asia, some of whom were driven out of Africa, because having moved to Africa, they were driven out by people like Idi Amin, who then come in the 1970s, 1980s, and they build lives in this country. You talk about people in England, Wales, Scotland. I know Scotland wants to be independent, so I'm going to say it respectfully, but you talk about that, right? And you talk about what they have done to the country. You talk about people where I lived in Birmingham, and I have a mixed feeling about Birmingham. It's not my favorite city, guys, and y'all know that. But still, you look at what Birmingham has become. You look at my community in Kings Heath, which is a hell of a community, and what it's come, where people there are celebrating. They've just, had a fantastic Queen's Heath Pride that you've just done a great job with, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got a Britain that can actually look back and say, yeah, there are good things that this country has become, right? The music, the literature, the sports. And I know we probably won't win the World Cup again this year, but still the sports, right? But then
we're doing okay.
We're doing okay. I'm not going to rule it out. The architecture that's comes in, and we've even got, remember, part of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, which only a generation ago, and I was talking about some Americans who didn't even know what the Good Friday Agreement was yesterday, who came out of a generation of violence and effectively a civil war, and they established an agreement that could bring communities together. Hopefully, still not there, but there's the potential there. It's not like, so you can look back on the past, but you don't just look back on the past. You don't look back on the past and distort it and make it a divisive past, which is it was us versus them. England versus the rest. England versus Europe. You look back at the past to make it in terms of what your future is. So grab onto the fact that you can have that and can have a pride in it. But you can have a pride in it in a way which isn't based on you being divided from others, and it is not based on you losing your sovereignty or losing your identity or losing your monarchy or losing your parliament or losing your laws. It's based on being part of a wider community where other people have pride in what they have done, and you are in a win-win situation, not a lose-lose.
It's about amplifying the greatness that we have. Basically.
Yeah. Damn right. And we can, I'm going to, there's, all right. So go off, all you folks, I will say about you now, go off, but put, Heather Small. What have you done today to make yourself proud? Go blare that full blast right now. It's going to be my song for the day tomorrow on Facebook and onwards and upwards. Cause damn it. What do we do, Tim? We persist.
Hell yeah. Anyway, over an hour, but you know what? It was absolutely worth it. Every minute of it. As always, Scott, thank you so much, man. A great conversation. Can't wait for the next one after 2 weeks.
I'll see you in 2 weeks, buddy. Stay safe, stay sane.
Likewise, man.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do me a big favor and make sure that you've subscribed on our YouTube channel and you like this video and you shared it to as many people as you possibly can, to keep them informed and get them out of the clickbait shadows. But we can't do this on our own. We have to do this all together as a growing community that believes in truth. And we want to get rid of these clickbait, rage bait shenanigans that is proliferating the web and poisoning everything that is out there today. Now, if you can't afford it as well, please consider joining us as a paid member on retortmedia.com/support. This supports not just the podcast that we do here, but also the reporting that we do on Retort Media ecosystem, where we try to maximize the reach to as many people as we possibly can through information and real journalism that prioritizes facts over fiction. Now, with that, guys, thank you so much for all of your support. Much love, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.
You are listening to